They thought I was the family failure, the cousin who couldn't afford a decent suit, the one who still rode the bus while they drove luxury cars. Last Tuesday, I owned their company. Today, I'm about to destroy everything they think they know about success. My name is David, and for 32 years, I've been the punchline of every family gathering. The disappointment, the one who chose to work at a small nonprofit instead of chasing the corporate ladder like my cousins. They measured worth in designer labels and vacation photos. I measured it in something they couldn't see. But let me start where it all began to unravel for them. The law firm's conference room smelled like leather and old money. Mahogany table, crystal water glasses, the kind of place where million-dollar decisions happen over handshakes. I sat in my thrift store button-down, watching my cousin Richard adjust his $1,000 tie for the third time. "We need to discuss the Henderson Group acquisition," Richard announced, playing the role of family patriarch he'd assigned himself after Uncle James passed. "The board meeting is tomorrow, and frankly, we need every shareholder vote." My cousin Michelle nodded eagerly. Designer handbag on the table like a trophy. "The deal will triple our quarterly profits." "It's exactly what Uncle James would have wanted." I said nothing, just listened, just watched. "David," Richard's voice carried that familiar tone of barely contained irritation. "You've been quiet. Surely even you can see the benefits of this merger. Even you." Those two words had followed me my entire life. "I'm listening," I replied. Michelle laughed. That sharp sound she made when she thought someone was being particularly naive. "Listening is good, David. But we need action. We need commitment. This isn't one of your little charity projects." The irony almost made me smile. If only they knew. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened in that conference room, you need to know about my grandmother, Mei Chun. She died when I was 15, but her lessons shaped everything that came after. Grandma Mei came to America with nothing but a suitcase and unshakable principles. She built a small grocery store in Chinatown from savings scraped together dollar by dollar. Never borrowed money. Never compromised her values. Never trusted anyone who valued flash over substance. "David," she used to tell me while counting receipts at her kitchen table, "the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. Real power whispers." She left me her store when she died. My cousins expected me to sell it immediately, use the money for college, join the family race for status and recognition. Instead, I kept it running. Worked there every day after school, every weekend, every summer. My family thought I was wasting my potential. They didn't understand that Grandma Mei had taught me to see opportunity where others saw obligation. The store wasn't just a business. It was a laboratory, a place to learn about people, about money, about the difference between appearing successful and actually being successful. While my cousins competed for internships at prestigious firms, I was studying customer behavior, supply chain optimization, and most importantly, how to spot undervalued assets that others overlooked. By the time I graduated college, they thought I was stuck in a dead-end job, serving customers who paid with food stamps and counting quarters. They pitied me, offered me real jobs at their companies out of family obligation. I thanked them politely and declined, because while they were climbing corporate ladders, I was building something they couldn't see. Something that started with Grandma Mei's grocery store and grew into a network of investments, partnerships, and holdings that spanned 3 states. The nonprofit job? That was real. I genuinely cared about community development. But it was also perfect cover. Who suspects the guy making $40,000 a year of secretly controlling assets worth millions? For 15 years, I watched my cousins measure each other's worth in car payments and vacation destinations. For 15 years, I stayed quiet while they made jokes about my simple life and lack of ambition. For 15 years, I waited. The Henderson Group acquisition was their masterstroke. A billion-dollar construction company with contracts across the Pacific Northwest. The kind of deal that would cement their status as serious players in commercial real estate. What they didn't know was that I already owned Henderson Group. Not directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. I owned it through a series of holding companies and investment vehicles that I'd been building since I was 23. the kind of complex financial structure that successful people use to protect and grow their wealth quietly. The kind of structure my cousins would never expect from someone who still shopped at thrift stores. Richard was explaining the acquisition timeline when my phone buzzed. A text from my attorney. Documents are ready. Henderson deal can close tomorrow if you give the word. I looked up from my phone to find Michelle staring at me with that expression she'd perfected over the years. Pity mixed with frustration. The look you give a child who refuses to grow up. David, I know this is overwhelming, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. These numbers are probably bigger than anything you've dealt with. But we really need you to trust us on this. Trust them. The cousins who'd spent decades treating me like a charity case. Who'd made their careers stepping on people they considered beneath them. Who'd forgotten every lesson about integrity and hard work that Grandma May had tried to teach our family. I understand the numbers, I said quietly. Richard's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Understanding and having experience are different things. David, this isn't about running a corner store. This is about real business. Real money. Real money. Coming from the man who'd inherited his position at the family company and whose biggest financial decision was choosing between a BMW and a Mercedes. I thought about Grandma May's words. About power that whispers instead of shouts. About the difference between appearing successful and being successful. You're right, I said. This is about real money. Something in my tone made Richard pause. Made Michelle look at me with new attention. The Henderson Group is worth approximately $1.2 billion, I continued. Their annual revenue is $800 million. Their profit margins are exceptional because they've cornered the market on sustainable construction materials in the Pacific Northwest. The room went quiet. They also have exclusive contracts with 6 major tech companies for campus expansion projects through 2027, I added. And they own 40,000 acres of timber rights in Oregon that most people don't know about. Richard's face had gone pale. How do you know all of this? I stood up slowly, walked to the window that overlooked downtown Seattle. The city sprawled below us, full of people making assumptions about each other based on appearances. Full of people like my cousins who confused expensive clothes with actual worth. I know because I own it, I said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Michelle's voice came out as barely a whisper. What? I turned back to face them. Richard was gripping the edge of the conference table like he needed it to stay upright. Michelle's designer handbag had slipped from her lap to the floor, contents spilling across the expensive carpet. I own Henderson Group, I repeated. I've owned it for 3 years, along with 12 other companies, for real estate development firms, and a portfolio of investments worth approximately $200 million. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But you work at a non-profit, Michelle stammered. You ride the bus. You shop at thrift stores. Yes, I said. I do all of those things. Because unlike you, I learned the difference between having money and spending money. I learned it from Grandma May, who built something real from nothing while everyone else was obsessed with looking successful. The truth was pouring out of me now. 15 years of quiet observation and careful planning finally given voice. Every family gathering where you pitied my simple life. Every time you offered me a job out of charity. Every joke about my lack of ambition. I was building something you couldn't see because you were too busy performing success to recognize the real thing. Richard found his voice. That's impossible. We would have known. The family company's financial advisors would have. Would have what? Noticed that your biggest potential acquisition was already owned by the cousin you dismiss as a failure? Your advisors recommended the Henderson deal because it looked like a smart investment from the outside. They never thought to dig deeper into the ownership structure. I walked back to the table, sat down in my thrift store shirt across from their designer clothes and expensive accessories. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow's board meeting will go ahead as planned. You'll present your acquisition proposal. And then I'll decline to sell. Michelle's face was flushed red. You can't do this. This is about family. About Uncle James's legacy. Uncle James's legacy? I laughed. and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Uncle James believed in hard work and treating people with respect. He believed in building something meaningful instead of just accumulating status symbols. Everything you've forgotten. Richard was calculating now, I could see it in his eyes. The family businessman trying to find an angle, a way to turn this situation to his advantage. Fine, he said. You want to play games? Let's talk numbers. What's your price? My price. For Henderson Group. Everything has a price, David. Even your revenge fantasies. I stood up again, gathered my jacket from the back of my chair. A jacket I'd bought for $15 at a consignment shop, and one that had been present at more million-dollar deals than their entire designer wardrobes combined. See, that's where you're wrong, Richard. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about money. This is about respect. I headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and about your assumption that everything has a price? Grandma May's store is still running. Still serving the community. Still profitable. I could have sold it for development rights years ago for more money than you make in a decade. But some things matter more than profit margins. I left them sitting in that conference room, surrounded by the trappings of success they'd spent their lives accumulating, finally understanding that they'd been playing a game where they didn't even know the rules. The board meeting the next day was everything I'd hoped it would be. The Henderson Group acquisition was presented with the kind of pomp and ceremony that Richard loved. Charts and graphs and projections about quarterly growth. A room full of executives nodding approvingly at the family's strategic vision. When they finished their presentation, the board chair turned to me. David, as one of our minority shareholders, do you have any questions about the proposal? I stood up slowly. Same thrift store clothes. Same understated demeanor. But now the entire room was paying attention in a way they never had before. Actually, I said, I do have a question. What happens to an acquisition when the target company's owner decides not to sell? The board chair looked confused. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Henderson Group isn't publicly traded, I explained. It's privately held, which means the owner has complete discretion over any sale. Richard's face was stone. Michelle was staring at her hands. And I'm that owner, I continued. So my question is, what's the company's backup plan when the Henderson deal falls through? The silence that followed was beautiful. One by one, the board members turned to look at Richard and Michelle, the strategic masterminds who'd somehow overlooked the minor detail of whether their acquisition target was actually for sale. Furthermore, I said, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have, I'd like to propose an alternative strategic direction for the company. One that focuses on sustainable development and community investment rather than aggressive expansion. I outlined my vision for the family business. Projects that would honor Uncle James's values while still generating strong returns. Partnerships with local organizations. Development that strengthened communities instead of displacing them. The board listened with the kind of attention that comes from realizing they dramatically underestimated someone. When I finished, the board chair asked, David, would you be interested in taking a more active role in the company's strategic planning? Richard's jaw tightened. Michelle looked like she wanted to disappear. I'd be honored, I said. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my office on the 32nd floor of a building I own downtown. The view includes Grandma May's old neighborhood, where her store is still operating under the management of her former employee's daughter. The family company is thriving under a new strategic direction that balances profit with purpose. Richard and Michelle have adapted somewhat. They still prefer designer clothes and expensive cars, but they've learned to respect the difference between looking successful and being successful. More importantly, they've learned that assumptions about people based on appearances are not just wrong, they're dangerous. In business and in life, the Henderson Group continues to grow under my ownership, pioneering sustainable construction techniques that other companies are now scrambling to copy. The nonprofit where I still work part-time has expanded its community development programs with funding from my foundation. And I still shop at thrift stores, still ride the bus sometimes, still live in the same modest apartment I've had for years. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because Grandma May taught me that real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about who you are when no one is watching. It's about building something meaningful instead of just accumulating status symbols. It's about understanding that the most powerful people in any room are usually the ones who don't need to prove it. The irony is delicious. My cousin spent years trying to teach me about success while I was busy actually achieving it. They measured worth in car payments and vacation photos while I was building an empire they couldn't see. They thought quiet meant weak. They thought modest meant poor. They thought different meant less than. They were wrong about everything. But here's what I've learned that matters more than any business deal or investment return. Being underestimated is actually a superpower. When people dismiss you, they stop paying attention. They stop competing with you. They stop trying to block your path. They just get out of your way and let you work. Everyone has a story about being underestimated, about being dismissed by people who confused loud with strong, expensive with valuable, flashy with successful. The question is, what did you do with that underestimation? Did you let it define you, or did you use it as fuel? Did you prove them wrong quietly, or did you waste energy trying to convince them they were wrong? Did you build something real, or did you just build the appearance of something real? Most importantly, when your moment came, were you ready? Because here's the thing about quiet power. It's only quiet until it's not. And when it speaks, everyone listens. Your story is waiting. What are you building while they're not paying attention? Hit subscribe if you're ready to stop being underestimated.